On April 17, 2026, a 68-year-old man named Gilberto Ramos was hiking the chained section of Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. He had a permit. The chains have required one since 2022, specifically to keep this exact section safer. At around 2 in the afternoon, he lost his balance and fell. Rangers found him on the north side of the formation, near a spot called Big Bend. He was the first person to die on those chains since the permit system began. 4 years without a single fall death there. Then, him. The park's own spokesperson described it, essentially, as a matter of timing, not recklessness, not a mistake anyone could point to, just the wrong half-second in the wrong place. That should bother you more than a warning sign would. Because Zion does this every year, not always on the chains, not always dramatically, but every year, the park adds names to a list that started in 2007, and every year, most of the people watching this kind of video assume they know exactly how those people died. They don't. This channel exists to find out what actually kills people in places like this, using the real record instead of the story everyone already believes. If that's useful to you, subscribe. By the end of this, you'll know what actually kills people at Zion, and why it's almost never the thing they were afraid of. Start with the number that should feel reassuring, and doesn't hold up. Between 2007 and 2025, the National Park Service recorded 57 deaths at Zion. Over that same period, the park logged more than 71 million visits. Do the arithmetic, and the odds of dying from a fall alone come out to roughly 1 in 2.5 million visitors. That is, by any honest measure, extraordinarily rare. Rare is not the same as never. Rare, multiplied by 71 million people, becomes a quiet certainty. Somewhere on that curve, someone is going to be the outlier. Zion just tells you, on average, that it will happen about 3 times a year, sometimes fewer, sometimes as many as 10, the way it did in 2015. And the visitors keep coming, nearly 5 million of them in 2025 alone, making Zion the second most visited national park in the country. A decade ago, that number was closer to 2.7 million. The park didn't get more dangerous. It got more crowded, and crowding is its own kind of exposure. The park's rescue teams feel that math directly. In 2025, Zion logged 158 search and rescue operations and 387 emergency medical calls. In 2024, 193 search and rescue incidents, most of them packed into the stretch between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Go back to 2019, and that number was 47. To 2020, 87. The trend line is not subtle. This is not a story about bad luck striking unlucky individuals. It's a story about a system, a landscape, a visitor count, and a set of physical laws, all interacting the same way, year after year, to produce roughly the same body count. The question isn't whether Zion will kill someone this year. It already knows it will. The question is why the visitors standing at the trailhead right now have no idea which mechanism it'll be. Here's the thing. Zion is one of the most engineered dangerous places in America. There are shuttle buses so you never have to drive the canyon yourself. There are carved steps and anchored chains on the one trail everyone associates with danger. There's a permit lottery, limiting foot traffic on that same trail to somewhere between 200 and 350 people a day. There's a flash flood rating system, posted at the visitor center, updated in real time. This park has spent decades trying to remove its own sharp edges. And it worked. That's the uncomfortable part. It actually worked. Which means that by the time you're standing at a trailhead in Zion, almost everything around you is quietly telling your brain that you're safe. The pavement, the railing, the other families, the gift shop you passed on the way in. None of that is lying to you. Exactly. It's just answering a different question than the one that matters. It's telling you the park has been managed. It is not telling you that the terrain, the weather, and your own body haven't changed at all. Your brain reads infrastructure as reassurance. That's not a flaw in you. It's a completely reasonable shortcut that happens to be wrong here, because Zion's real hazards were never on the trail. They're in the sandstone under your boots, the 15 minutes it takes a drainage to become a flood, and the heart you brought with you from home. which has no idea it's supposed to be careful today. Here's a way to think about it that we'll come back to more than once. Zion doesn't kill you with the drop. It kills you with the last few feet of margin. The buffer you didn't know you'd already spent, in a place that told you, at every step, that you had more of it left than you actually did. Keep that in mind. It explains almost everything that's about to follow. Now let's take apart the fear you walked in with. Most people arrive at Zion afraid of one very specific image: losing their grip on the chains of Angel's Landing and falling 1,000 feet into the canyon. It's a vivid fear. It's also, statistically, aimed at almost the wrong target. Falls are, in fact, the leading cause of death at Zion. 28 fatal falls recorded between 2007 and 2025, out of 57 total deaths. Nearly 40% of them happened on or near Angel's Landing. So far, your instinct was right. Here's where it stops being right. If nearly 40% of fatal falls happened on Angel's Landing, that means roughly 6 out of every 10 did not. They happened on the 1-mile Canyon Overlook Trail. They happened on permitted canyoneering routes with names most visitors have never heard. They happened on trails that don't come with a chain, a permit lottery, or a reputation. And the chained section itself, the part everyone pictures? One fall death in 4 years, from 2022 until Ramos, in April 2026. During that same stretch, the rest of the park kept adding names to the list. The most feared trail in Zion has become, statistically, one of the safer places to stand. Here's why that makes sense, once you understand the actual mechanism. This isn't really about height. It's about what you land on. A fall onto a hard surface from 49 feet carries roughly a 50% fatality rate. From 78 feet, it climbs to 90%. Read that again. 50 feet, on rock, is already close to a coin flip. You do not need a 1,000-foot cliff. You need a slick ledge 1 story above a sandstone bench, and a half-second of lost friction. That's most of Zion. The park is built almost entirely out of hard, exposed sandstone, and that sandstone turns slippery the moment it's wet. The mechanism isn't a leap into open air. It's a small slip, on uneven footing, that has nowhere gentle to land. And there's a detail about the popular route that almost never makes it into the warning signs. To reach the famous chains on Angel's Landing, hikers first climb 21 switchbacks and roughly 1,500 feet of elevation. By the time most people reach the part they were afraid of, they are already tired, already hungry, already thirsty. The dangerous part isn't the chains. It's everything your body already went through to get there. So here's the actual finding, the one the assumed killer story hides. Falls do lead, but the fall that gets you isn't the dramatic one you pictured on the way in. It's the ordinary one, on ordinary ground, after the hard part was supposedly already over. That reframe applies to almost everything else in this park. Once you see it here, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Consider what that means for a specific person. Gilberto Ramos was 68, from Laredo, Texas. He had a permit for the chained section, the part of the trail the park had spent 4 years making safer. He reached it, he was on it, and at roughly 2 in the afternoon, he lost his balance and fell. Rangers recovered him near Big Bend, on the north side of the formation that same evening. There is no witness account of the moment itself in the public record. Nothing about his footwear, his pace, or whether he was resting or moving. The park statement described it as a loss of balance, nothing more specific than that. And that absence of detail is, in its own way, the point. This wasn't a story with a villain or a warning that got ignored. It was a person, on a trail built to be as safe as the National Park Service knows how to make it, meeting the one variable no permit system can fix: the width of a ledge and the grip of a boot. 28 people have fallen to their deaths in Zion since 2007. Men, roughly 1.5 times more often than women, concentrated in the 45 to 54 and 55 to 64 age brackets, not teenagers taking risks, but capable adults in the middle of their lives. Most of them were hikers, not climbers, not base jumpers. Hikers, on a trail, doing the thing the park was built for them to do. That's the leading cause of death at Zion, and it's the mildest thing this park does to people. Here's what almost nobody accounts for when they picture Zion's danger. The deadliest single day in the park's history didn't involve a cliff at all. It involved 0.63 inches of rain. On September 14, 2015, 7 canyoneers picked up a permit for Keyhole Canyon at 7:40 in the morning. At 2:22 that afternoon, the National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning for the area, and the park closed its canyons to canyoneering. The group entered Keyhole sometime between 3:30 and 4:30 that afternoon. Storms broke over the canyon within the hour. In 15 minutes, the North Fork of the Virgin River rose from 55 cubic feet per second to 2,630. Rescue teams located the group's empty vehicles that same evening. They could not go in. The flooding and the ongoing threat of more meant search operations couldn't safely begin until the following morning. More than 60 searchers from multiple agencies spent over 760 hours recovering the 7 canyoneers. The last body was found on the 3rd day. All 7 were identified: Mark McKenzie, Linda and Steve Arthur, Gary Favela, Don Teichner, Muku Reynolds, and Robin Brum, ages 51 to 59, from California and Nevada. This is the mechanism behind that number, and it's worth understanding precisely, because it applies to more than one canyon in this park. Slot canyons don't flood the way a river floods. They funnel. Desert sandstone barely absorbs water, so rain becomes runoff almost instantly, and a narrow canyon concentrates that runoff into a wall of moving debris. Noah is direct about the physics. 6 inches of fast-moving water is enough to take an adult off their feet. 12 inches can carry away a car. Death in these events is usually not slow drowning. It's blunt trauma from the current itself or from what the current is carrying. And the part that should genuinely unsettle you is that the storm that kills you doesn't have to be visible from where you're standing. A canyon floor in Zion can sit under clear blue sky while a thunderstorm dumps rain on higher ground, miles upstream, out of sight. By the time the water reaches you, there's no rain falling where you are, no obvious sign, just a sound and then a rise. That's the trap built into the geography itself, and it's why these canyons get marketed as waiting walks with shuttle access, when what they actually are is drainage. Here's a cause that never makes headlines the way a fall does, because nobody photographs a heart attack. Sudden cardiac death is, by the research, the leading cause of non-traumatic death during mountain hiking. More than 90% of cases involve men over 34. The mechanism, as best understood, is a coronary plaque rupturing under unaccustomed strain, forming a clot, and triggering a fatal arrhythmia. The strongest known triggers are unusual exertion, especially on a first day out, sustained activity without rest, and going without food or fluid while pushing hard. That's not a description of an extreme athlete. That's a description of an ordinary day hike. Zion recorded 2 cardiac deaths at the exact same location within 4 months of each other in 2024, both on the West Rim Trail near a spot called Scout Lookout. In January, a 63-year-old man from San Diego reported unresponsive, treated with CPR and a defibrillator for nearly 90 minutes before he was pronounced dead. In May, another man, age unknown, at the same spot after another emergency response. Scout Lookout is not the dangerous part of the trail. It's where careful people stop. Exertional heat stroke is not what most people picture when they hear the phrase. It isn't discomfort, it's a core temperature climbing past 40 degrees Celsius, roughly 104 Fahrenheit, with the central nervous system beginning to fail alongside it. Left untreated, it progresses toward multi-organ failure, with a mortality rate that can reach 26% even with treatment. It happens to otherwise healthy people, exercising hard, in heat their bodies weren't given time to adjust to. Here's the complication almost nobody warns you about. The fix people reach for instinctively. Drinking more water can itself become dangerous. Documented cases exist of people drinking 4.5 to 5 quarts of water in 2 to 3 hours, developing a dangerously diluted sodium level, and collapsing with symptoms that look exactly like the heat illness they were trying to avoid. On August 30th, 2021, a 32-year-old man named John Henry Wolfe was hiking the exit route from a canyon known as the Subway when he reported heat exhaustion. Park medics found him unresponsive. They performed CPR for roughly an hour before stopping, on medical guidance, and he was extracted by helicopter, long-lined out from the canyon. That same summer, Zion's Rangers were already fielding a spike in heat-related emergency calls tied to record crowds and record heat. The trap here is calibration. You start your hike in a cool morning, and your body files that temperature away as the day's baseline. It isn't. If you've ever hiked past a warning sign because you felt fine in the moment, tell me in the comments. And if this is changing how you'd plan a trip to a place like this, a like helps more than you'd think. Because the part most people get completely wrong about this park is still coming. The Narrows is not a trail beside a river. It is the river, and in November, that river does something most visitors never plan for. On the night of November 22nd, 2022, a married couple set out on a permitted 16-mile hike through the Narrows. Overnight, the water temperature in the Virgin River, as recorded by the USGS, dropped to 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Air temperatures in the park that week fell close to freezing overnight, even with daytime highs in the mid-60s. The husband later reported that the two of them became dangerously cold and began showing symptoms consistent with hypothermia. The following morning, Zion's search and rescue team found the woman near the river. Fellow hikers had already attempted CPR. More than 20 rescuers responded. They had stopped roughly a mile and a half from Riverside Walk, a paved trail with facilities. It's not clear from the record whether they knew how close they were. Cold water pulls heat from the body far faster than cold air at the same temperature, and immersion doesn't give you a break the way walking through cold air does. Hours of continuous waiting, in a canyon where the sun rarely reaches the floor, adds up. Nobody packs for hypothermia in a desert. But a desert with a river running through the middle of it is exactly where hypothermia happens. There's a smaller cluster of causes in the data, and they matter less for what they explain than for what they correct. 5 deaths at Zion between 2007 and 2025 are recorded simply as undetermined, meaning investigators could not establish intent. That's roughly 1 in 11 of every fatality in the park. It's not a dramatic category, it's an honest one, and it's a useful check on any video, including this one, that tries to assign a clean cause to every name on the list. Some of them, the record genuinely doesn't know. 3 deaths are recorded as suicide. This isn't a mechanism this channel is going to dramatize, and it shouldn't be treated as an accident statistic the way a fall or a flood is. It exists in the data, and leaving it out entirely would make every other number in this video look artificially small. If any part of this is close to home for you, support exists, and it's worth reaching out to it. 1 death is recorded as a motor vehicle crash. Nationally, across the whole park system, vehicle crashes are one of the leading causes of death. At Zion, they barely register, and that's not an accident either. The park's shuttle system removes most private vehicles from the canyon floor entirely. It's one of the few places in this list where infrastructure clearly worked exactly as intended. And then there's rockfall, which deserves a mention specifically because it hasn't killed anyone in the recorded data, even though it easily could. In June of 2026, a boulder came down in the Narrows, missing a group of 8 children and 6 adults by 10 to 20 feet. It wasn't the first time that stretch of canyon had produced a close call. Undercut sandstone sheds blocks into a corridor 20 to 30 feet wide, with nowhere to step aside. No fitness level, and no amount of preparation changes your odds against that one. It's the only mechanism on this list that's pure chance, which may be exactly why the park doesn't build a warning sign around it. None of these causes operates alone. That's the part the list format hides. A hiker who's slightly dehydrated is more likely to misjudge a step near a ledge. A hiker who's pushed past their turnaround time to make a permit worth the trip is more likely to be crossing a slot canyon exactly when a storm that started somewhere else finally arrives. A heart already straining from unaccustomed exertion doesn't announce itself until it stops. None of these are separate stories. They're the same story, told through 5 different organ systems and 5 different stretches of trail. That's the lens worth carrying through the rest of this. Zion doesn't kill you with the drop. It kills you with the last few feet of margin, the buffer you didn't realize you'd already spent, in a place that spent decades engineering itself to feel safer than it actually is. The park's own infrastructure proves this. Chains, shuttles, carved steps. a permit lottery, a flash flood rating system, a search and rescue team fielding 158 operations, and 387 medical calls in a single year. All of it works. It has driven the one danger everyone can see, the chained cliff edge, down to nearly zero. What it cannot do is manufacture margin everywhere else. It cannot widen a slot canyon. It cannot cool a desert in July. It cannot give a 63-year-old heart more warning than it's going to get. The park removed the danger you can see. It left the ones you can't. And every mechanism we've walked through so far is really just that one sentence, told a different way. Here's what the data can't show you directly, but strongly implies: by the time you're in trouble in Zion, you are often the last person able to notice. Start with heat. Even mild dehydration is known to impair thermoregulation and put strain on the cardiovascular system, and the research on cognitive function in heat is genuinely mixed. Some studies show clear decline, some show none. What does seem to hold up is that complex, multi-step judgment degrades before simple physical tasks do. And should we turn back, is about as complex a judgment as a hike ever asks of you. It's not that your legs stop working. It's that the part of your brain built to weigh a decision starts working with worse information, exactly when the decision matters most. There's a related finding worth being careful with. Some research on heat exposure suggests it can lower risk perception and increase risk-taking behavior generally. That same research found no clear link between hydration and how hikers assessed risk specifically. So hold this loosely. Heat may be quietly turning down your internal alarm, even while it isn't obviously scrambling your thinking. Then there's the psychology. Every mountaineer already has a name for plan continuation bias, get-there-itis, in aviation, summit fever, everywhere else. It's the pull toward finishing what you started, intensified by everything you already spent to get there, the money, the time off, the permit you won in a lottery you might not win again. Turning around starts to feel like failure, even when it's the only correct decision left. This is a well-documented pattern in high-stakes environments generally. Whether it specifically shapes decisions on Zion's permitted trails hasn't been studied here directly, but the ingredients are all present. And then there's the simplest trap of all, the one built entirely out of what you can see. Chains, carved steps, a shuttle, a permit desk. Every one of those signals, institutional endorsement. Your brain reads that as safety, because most of the time, that's exactly what it means. Put those together, and you get the pattern behind almost every incident in this video. The people most affected by heat, by exertion, by their own compromised judgment, are the ones least equipped to notice it happening. Not because they're careless, because the exact systems that would normally warn them are the ones being degraded. Here's the fact that should sit with you longest. In Zion's worst moments, help cannot enter while the danger is still active. During the 2015 Keyhole Canyon flood, rangers located the group's vehicles that same evening. They could not go in. The flooding, and the continued risk of more, meant search operations were suspended until conditions allowed. It isn't that rescue was slow, it's that rescue was, for a period of hours, not possible at all. When it does happen, it happens at scale. More than 60 searchers spent over 760 hours recovering the Keyhole Canyon group. A 2022 search in the Narrows involved 170 responders across 4 days, with the river still running above 1,100 cubic feet per second while the search was underway. The body was ultimately found 6 miles downstream. Medical response is no faster, and sometimes no more successful. The January 2024 cardiac response at Scout Lookout involved more than 20 team members, including EMTs and paramedics, who hand-carried a defibrillator and heart monitor up the trail and administered CPR for nearly 90 minutes. The May 2024 response at the same spot involved more than 33 people. Both patients died. 90 minutes of expert care, arriving as fast as a team physically could move, and the outcome didn't change. Air support isn't even guaranteed to be local. The 2021 heat fatality near the subway was extracted by a helicopter borrowed from Grand Canyon National Park. And capacity is trending the wrong way. Zion's annual visitation nearly doubled between 2010 and 2022. while the park's total staff went down. Nationwide, the Park Service has lost roughly 2,500 permanent employees since the start of 2025, with a hiring freeze preventing backfill. Add to that the terrain itself. The Narrows runs through a slot canyon, where cell service is effectively non-existent. Even a call for help that gets through often can't say where the caller actually is, because, as one Zion Ranger put it, the park has too many slot canyons for somewhere near the top of a slot to mean anything useful. The danger in this park does not pause politely while help travels toward you. Sometimes, it can't even start moving until the danger has already finished. So who actually ends up in this data? Men, by a wide margin. Nearly 3 times as many male deaths as female across the park overall, and 1.5 times as many among fall deaths specifically. Nationally, across the entire park system, 79% of deaths involve men, and just over half involve people 45 or older. Zion's own numbers echo that almost exactly. The highest single age bracket for fatalities is 55 to 64. Not teenagers chasing a viral photo. Adults, often experienced ones, in the middle of active, capable lives. And here's the finding worth sitting with. The people who fell to their deaths at Zion were, overwhelmingly, hikers. Not climbers, not base jumpers, not people doing something the park would call extreme. Just hikers, on a trail, at the wrong half second. Look at the 2 deaths from April 2026. A 68-year-old man, permitted, on the chains, who simply lost his balance. And days later, a second hiker, alone, on a route his own family said he knew well, described by investigators as a low-level fall, meaning he didn't even go far. Neither of these is a story about recklessness. If anything, both are stories about people who had done the preparation the park asks for. That's the pattern across almost every mechanism in this video. Not the unprepared tourist wandering off trail. A permit holder, a returning hiker, a married couple following a route the park itself issues permits for, 16 miles, who simply ran out of daylight and warmth 1.5 miles from pavement. The margin these people lost wasn't recklessness. It was a few degrees of body heat, a half second of grip, a slightly later start than the heat could forgive. Ordinary competence, meeting an environment that had already quietly used up the buffer around it. That's the sentence this whole video has been circling. It could be you. Not because you'd be careless, but because careful and safe are not, in this particular park, the same thing. Zion isn't hostile. It doesn't want anything. It's just indifferent, which somehow ends up being worse. The chains get safer, the shuttle keeps the roads clear, the rating system posts its warnings, and none of it changes what a slot canyon does to 15 minutes of rain, or what an unaccustomed climb does to a 60-year-old heart. The park doesn't kill you with the drop. It kills you with the margin you didn't know you'd already spent, in a place that spent decades convincing you otherwise. Of everything in the record, the detail I keep returning to is the couple 1.5 miles from pavement. That's how thin it actually is. What surprised you most here? The flood, the heart, or the cold? Tell me, and tell me which place you want this treatment applied to next. This channel exists to find the real mechanism behind places like this one. Subscribe if you want the next one too.